The fact that the animal is considered by most scientists, laymen, and the public alike as the largest, last, and most powerful non-avian dinosaur ever has attracted a huge number of people, including a certain demographic. As Riley continues in her article, Tyrannosaurus rex has primarily attracted attention from white, cisgender men. They are the ones that sell Tyrannosaurs to all of us, whether academically backed or self-styled. Even the non-binary multimedia-wielding persona given to the ungenderable Sue has what Riley Black calls a masculine gloss, directly a result of pop culture's depictions of the animal as a fearsome creature that can and will eat anything it wants. The fact that it is primarily men who are the ones interpreting Tyrannosaurus science doesn't help that either. Therefore, Tyrannosaurus rex, the tyrant lizard king, is a symbol of toxic masculinity.
What the fuck? Well. I am genuinely no longer surprised at pretty much anything at this point. And yes, you heard it right. There are now people claiming that Tyrannosaurus rex, the most famous dinosaur of all time, and in the eyes of the public, pretty much a media star, is a symbol of toxic masculinity. Yeah, apparently, if you want something that can both boost your testosterone levels and inspire you on a personal one, you know, as a human being, you don't put on an action movie or a fight scene or anything like that. Apparently, what you do put on is a movie, a documentary, a game or whatever, featuring a multi-ton, meat-eating, Mesozoic, excessively and inaccurately aggressive sack of scales, killing, ripping, and tearing everything in its path. And all because a paleontologist called Riley Black wrote an article in which he allowed his preconceived biases to speak louder than any rational thought. I mean, come on. Just look at his face, you could guess that he's the kind of individual who likes to shove woke nonsense into literally everything he talks about. And just in case any whiny man-baby comes here screeching about how Riley identifies as trans and therefore Riley is a woman, well, I still stand by my position of this very idea being a load of rubbish and bollocks, thanks to the very fact that no matter how much or how many times you change your phenotype, you cannot change your genotype. And identifying as whatever doesn't do that either. Which is true even in cases such as Turner syndrome or Klinefelter syndrome, so don't you even think about bringing those as arguments. Which doesn't mean I wanna walk over each and every individual who calls himself or herself trans, but I digress. Like, At this point, I no longer take claims like this seriously. What I do take seriously is the sheer amount of false premises and mental gymnastics that this bunch of idiots use to justify said ridiculous claims. Everything nowadays has to be linked to racism, to fascism, to Nazism, to patriarchy, or whatever the fuck. And this has been especially prevalent in the paleontology community for quite a long time. Even before the woke agenda and cancel culture became as mainstream as they are today. For example, you may have noticed the differences between the depictions of Tyrannosaurus rex that I'm using as a background right now. On the right side of the screen is a render from the T-Rex of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. It is inaccurate in terms of anatomy and behavior, but since this is what Black and many morons who agree with him would call a symbol of toxic masculinity, which is ironic because the damn thing is canonically a female, I decided to include it here. And on the left side of the screen is a photo of a figure made by UK-based company Rebor, which it named Kiss. In case you're wondering why it named it Kiss, it's because the figure features lips which cover the animal's teeth when the mouth is closed. And since there's an ongoing debate about if this was the case in the paleontology community, Rebor decided to do what I call a big brain pro gamer move and made a virtually identical figure with the exception of coloration and the fact that this other figure has exposed teeth, which it named Tusk. Stonks. Now what does this have to do with cancel culture and woke nonsense? Basically, if you disagree with, or so much as raises a doubt about, something that is pretty much universally accepted by those who run the show in the paleontology community, and play the same role in said community as Twitter's thought police, you are pretty much guaranteed to be cancelled within said community. And before you ask, no, even actual paleontologists are not safe from this. An example of this was the argument about which type of skin did T-Rex have. As kids we were all used to scaly T-Rexes. Jurassic Park, Turok, Primal Carnage, all that fun stuff showed scaly T-Rexes. But after some dinosaur fossils were found with preserved primitive feathers, and sometimes preserved feathers which resembled those of modern birds, some people began questioning themselves if T-Rex and other large carnivorous dinosaurs were really scaly after all. And when it comes to Tyrannosaurus rex specifically, it all reached a breaking point in 2012 with a description of a dinosaur named Yutyrannus from the Liaoning province of China. Some of you may remember it from Ark Survival Evolved. Why is this dinosaur so important in this argument? Well, some people had previously argued that dinosaurs like T-Rex were simply too big to have feathers, thanks to something called the square cube law. You may remember it from our school days. Basically, it is the law that dictates that as an object increases in size, its surface area increases proportionally to the square of the multiplier, or its volume increases proportionally to the cube of the multiplier. And when it comes to biology, more specifically zoology, and more specifically with animals that maintain a certain temperature, like mammals and birds do, this means that the bigger the animal is, the smaller is the amount of heat that it eliminates in proportion to what it produces. That is why in Asia, for example, there are deer and boar with a considerable amount of fur coexisting with elephants that have almost no fur. And for many, Yutyrannus' simple existence already invalidated this argument because, while it wasn't the largest meat-eating dinosaur around, it certainly wasn't the smallest, to say the least. In fact, of all dinosaurs that are proven without a shadow of a doubt to have had feathers, Yutyrannus is by far the largest. And the thing is, despite Yutyrannus not resembling T-Rex at first glance, very small details on the bones reveal that Yutyrannus was actually a relative of T-Rex. So we now had a relatively large carnivorous dinosaur that was basically fluffy, and it was related to T-Rex. So many people not only saw this as proof that large carnivorous dinosaurs could have had feathers, but as definitive proof that T-Rex itself and its close relatives had feathers. And as such, reconstructions featuring considerable amounts of feathers began popping up left and right. And here's the funny part. That ratiocination is inherently flawed because not only did Eutyrannus live in a far cooler environment than T-Rex did, it also was a very distant relative of T-Rex. You see, Eutyrannus was discovered in a formation called the Ixian Formation, which dates from the Aptian stage of the Cretaceous period. That's around 125 million years old. While T-Rex fossils are discovered in formations such as the Hell Creek Formation, which date from the Maastrichtian stage of the Cretaceous period, its very end, which dates to around 65 million years old. That's some 60 million years of difference, which means that chronologically, Eutyrannus is almost as ancient to T-Rex as T-Rex is ancient to us. But regardless, for a few years, many blindly accepted the simplistic assumption that T-Rex was heavily feathered, to the point of even Dr. Thomas Carr, arguably the greatest authority in Tyrannosaurids in the world, having been ridiculed time and time again for not giving in to this simplistic assumption. I myself was treated like shit many times for having questioned it. And although I must admit that at one point I did come to the conclusion that T-Rex likely, if not most likely, had a thin coat of feathers, I didn't do so because some morons bullied me into doing so, but because of my own thoughts and conclusions. Fast forward to 2017, and would you look at that? The skin impressions from many of T-Rex's closest relatives from many parts of the body were put together and they all were scaly. Which, in simple terms, meant that T-Rex and its closest relatives were at least majorly scaly. And while the debate regarding the presence of a few feathers here and there is still ongoing and is largely speculative, it's already a consensus that T-Rex and its closest relatives were, as a rule, scaly. So in simpler terms, people were treated like shit, treated like Jurassic Park fanboys, and de facto cancelled in the paleontology community for simply doubting about the secular dogma of T-Rex having had a lot of feathers, only for an actual study to actually prove them right and give the woke morons a bitch slap and a huge shut the fuck up. Another example is the already mentioned controversy regarding the presence or absence of lips. And although I must say that I personally lean towards the lip side, I've seen people from both sides of the controversy using arguments that I consider foolish, but I've only seen people from one side actively bullying and cancelling those that even slightly disagree with them. Which is ironically the side that I lean towards. And yes, I've been treated like shit by them too. More than once I have called into question some of the premises used to support this side, or at least stated the possibility that even if the vast majority of carnivorous dinosaurs were lipped, some could have had lips too short to cover their teeth completely. And I've been treated like shit many times simply for that. But in case you got curious regarding this whole controversy, there's a very nice and informative video from YouTuber Dinos Dragons, in which he reveals Rebor's T-Rex kiss figure and dives very deep into the whole controversy regarding lips. Link in the description. I highly recommend it, but I digress. Anyway, the heart of the matter is that modern paleontology, be it among actual authorities or just enthusiasts, is dominated by pathetic, psychologically weak soy milk drinkers. So, points of view and attitudes like the one you saw in the beginning of this video are definitely not uncommon in this community. And as a wise man once said, everything woke turns to shit. Sorry for taking too long for this. I just had to take this out of my chest if I was going to make this video. Anyway, at the very least it can be said that the first 10 minutes or so of the video I'll be responding to did not focus on the woke bullshit of the author. So I'll be leaving that part out and only show the relevant parts. The link to the video itself will be in the description in case you want to watch the whole thing. Anyway, without further ado, let's jump headfirst into this pile of cow dung.
This animal has been taken up by non-scientific sources by over 100 years of patriarchal interpretation as the epitome of killing, bone-crushing, roaring, and raw power.
I can already tell I've got brain cancer simply by listening to that sentence. Yeah, it all comes down to patriarchal interpretation. It certainly has nothing to do with giving the public an image that it likes, so that you, as a result, can get some cash.
Any other interpretation of the beast tends to go under the radar.
Wrong again, or superficial at the very least. Even as recently as 2019, or even 2020, there were still articles saying that T-Rex was feathered. In 2019, a lot of articles like this one talked about a then new exhibition in the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, in which T-Rex was shown having a few feathers. And while the presence of a few feathers is not bad by itself because it's mostly speculative and the depiction is mostly scaly, many, if not most of the articles, said that that was the definitive reconstruction of the animal. And I can guarantee you many people went to that exhibition and actually enjoyed it. Because even though the T-Rex they saw there was not the same from their childhood or the action movies they liked, they were there to know what the thing was really like. And there's also this article from 2020, and if you scroll down, you can find this. Yeah. Even the wrists are wrong, for fuck's sake. In 2018, a documentary called The Real T-Rex was released, and it featured the animal with feathers and teeth-covering lips at a time where depictions of the animal with neither were making a comeback. Japanese Public International Broadcast Service NHK World Japan depicted T-Rex as being covered in feathers in 2019, and the list goes on and on. Don't know about you, but I wouldn't call that going under the radar.
Discovering, naming, buying, selling the T-Rex is about displaying power.
Remember that exhibition on the American Museum of Natural History that I mentioned? Well, this is the model of a full-grown T-Rex on that exhibition. Does this shit scream power to you? I don't know about you, but to me, this depiction screams, I'm on fucking crack! Not saying this is never the case with this dinosaur, but this video is implying that this is the rule even among scientists. So yeah.
To exert control over the dinosaur and subsequently over nature. It's also a theme that has been briefly explored in the very franchise that perpetuated the ferocious persona of the real-world animal. The funding gathered by the persona of the Rex has had to trickle down to other theropod dinosaurs and eventually to the unsung, more important heroes of the fossil record. Other dinosaurs could do with the popularity contest of the Rex if we, as a group of enthusiasts, scientists, or consumers, were to remove the persona of the Rex and look at it for what it is, and was, an impressive animal, then perhaps our attention could be better served in understanding the entire history of life on Earth rather than just a single species.
That's true. But it doesn't happen because of toxic masculinity. That happens because the public likes violence and because the public likes giant monsters. That is why the likes of King Kong and Godzilla are so popular.
Large dinosaurs from the southern hemisphere, South America, Africa, and Asia were as impressive and sometimes more than the Rex. Maybe we should analyze other dinosaurs as much as we do the Tyrannosaurus. build up the library of life habits for other organisms that don't have such a strongly masculine persona artificially tacked onto them.
I swear I'm not only losing IQ points, I'm also losing my sanity having to listen to this guy's bullshit about masculinity. Anyway, he mentioned dinosaurs outside of North America, and in this case, challenge accepted. I know a thing or two about the context regarding those, and no, it's not because I am Brazilian. It's because of a video from a YouTuber called Dino Diego, which is called Why is T-Rex Overrepresented in the Media? And spoiler alert, it ain't got jack shit to do with toxic masculinity! The heart of the matter is that when T-Rex was discovered, it was the largest carnivorous dinosaur discovered until then. And not only was it discovered in American soil, it was discovered while movies were becoming more popular. If you ask me, these two factors are the most important ones in understanding why T-Rex became so popular and why it is still so popular. Take a look at this size chart. It depicts all the largest theropods that we know of. And out of all of them, only one is not carnivorous. Y'all know of Tyrannosaurus rex, so let's take a closer look at the others. Spinosaurus. Discovered in 1912 in Egypt by Austrian paleontologist Richard Markgraf and described in 1915 by German paleontologist Ernst Stromer. The remains were very fragmentary, and everything that was known of the skull was part of the lower jaw. And even then, the few that was available to science was destroyed in an Allied bombing in 1944, because the director of the museum in which the specimen was stored was sympathetic to the Nazis, while Ernst Stromer was not. So for about 50 years, all that was known of Spinosaurus were drawings of the original specimen, until another specimen was described in 1996. Carcharodontosaurus. Initially known only from a few teeth, discovered in 1924 in Algeria and described in 1925. However, in 1931, Ernst Stromer, the very same paleontologist who described Spinosaurus, described a partial skull belonging to Carcharodontosaurus that he had found way back in 1914 in Egypt. Said specimen was destroyed in the same Allied bombing that destroyed the original Spinosaurus specimen, and it wouldn't be until 1995 that more material belonging to Carcharodontosaurus would be found. Acrocanthosaurus. Discovered in 1940 in Oklahoma and described in 1950, it, along with T-Rex, are the only dinosaurs in this size chart that were discovered in North America. It should be emphasized here that it was both discovered and described while T-Rex was solidifying its fame in the media, if it hadn't managed to do it already. Also, no complete skull from this species would be discovered until the 1980s, and it wouldn't be described until the 1990s. Tarbosaurus. Discovered in 1946 by Soviet paleontologist Evgeny Maleev during a Soviet-Mongolian expedition to the Gobi Desert. Maleev initially identified the species as another species of Tyrannosaurus. In the same expedition, he discovered smaller Tyrannosaur fossils and described them as different species. It wouldn't be until 1965 when another Soviet paleontologist named Anatoly Konstantinovich Rozdestvensky realized that not only was the adult specimen a completely different species from Tyrannosaurus, he also found out that the other Tyrannosaur fossils that were found actually belonged to the same species, just at different growth stages. As such, Anatoly had to rename the species, and by taxonomy laws, the name Tarbosaurus, which was used by Maleev to identify one of the juveniles, was used for the new genus. Giganotosaurus. Discovered in Argentina in 1993, the specimen had almost 70% of its skeleton preserved, but the skull was incomplete. There is still an ongoing debate regarding its size, and it recently received media spotlight for being the main antagonist in Jurassic World Dominion. Mapusaurus. Discovered in 1997 in Argentina, with the excavation finishing in 2001, it was described in 2006. It was discovered in a bone bed with various individuals from different life stages. One of the bare handful of such cases among theropods. The specimens were very fragmentary, and only by combining them, despite the differences in age, were the paleontologists able to have a general image of the animal. Tyrannotidon. Despite what the name may suggest, it was not closely related to T-Rex. Rather, it was closely related to the already mentioned Carcharodontosaurus, Giganotosaurus, and Maposaurus. Its remains are very fragmentary, and so it is reconstructed after what is known from its closest relatives, but not known from itself. As you could see, while T-Rex was getting more and more famous by the day, most of the largest theropods that we know of weren't even known yet. The only theropods that could have arguably competed with T-Rex on the screen were Spinosaurus and Carcharodontosaurus. However, when Spinosaurus was described, the First World War was already happening, and one could argue that Carcharodontosaurus was described just way too late. Even if the German filmmakers during the Weimar Republic had chosen to feature said dinosaurs in their films, which they didn't. And while the known material of those species was extremely fragmentary, unlike T-Rexes, as to begin with, a complete skull of a T-Rex had already been discovered 4 years prior to Spinosaurus' discovery, doesn't help our case either. Then there's Acrocanthosaurus, which was also from North America, but it was only described in the 1950s, so it most certainly came way too late. And regarding Tarbosaurus, the other tyrannosaur in the size chart that was discovered in Mongolia, well, not only was it considered just another species of Tyrannosaurus at first, it was also discovered by a Soviet Mongolian expedition right after the Second World War, at the very start of the Cold War, a period marked by severe imperialism from both the United States and the Soviet Union. A period marked by the ideological clash between capitalism and communism, spearheaded by the United States and the Soviet Union respectively, in which both sides did their best to hinder the opposing side's influence in virtually all areas of society, including filmmaking. So when Tarbosaurus finally became its own genus of giant theropod with a size analogous to that of Tyrannosaurus itself, its American counterpart was getting more and more fame by the day in the media across the entire Western world, thanks to American imperialism as a result of the Iron Curtain. And when it comes to Giganotosaurus, Maposaurus, and Tyrannotidon, they were all discovered after the fall of the Soviet Union, and the fact that 2 of these 3 species are only known from very fragmentary remains certainly does not help us here. And apart from that, South America and Northern Africa aren't exactly 2 of the most economically developed regions in the world, to say the least. Which means they don't have as many resources that could go to expeditions in order to find fossils, and research in order to study what would be actually found, if compared to the United States. See? No toxic masculinity to be seen here, but actually a series of historical, social, and ideological factors.
Maybe we should take a break from the arbitrary arguments and debates about the biology of a single animal, when they more often than not reflect men's aesthetic preferences. I think it is unsurprising that a lot of the arguments about whether or not Tyrannosaurus was feathered boil down to largely white cis men finding feathers unattractive or feminine.
And there he goes again with his, it's all fault of the white cis, and I suppose straight men belly aching.
Nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
Nuance tends only to enter the conversation among folks that are in the know. Thus, those of us who autistically hyperfocus on the specifics of dinosaur reconstructions. And I mean that in the least derogatory of ways. I mean, most of us STEM folks are on some part of the spectrum anyway.
Least derogatory of ways. Pathetic. If you feel that clarification was needed, then by your own standards, you probably shouldn't have made that joke. Imagine if it was an actual right-winger, a conservative saying that joke on a video like that. And in case you're like, no, you're only saying that because it's a joke about a group you're not in, then you may choke on our words because I'm actually autistic myself. Asperger, to be more specific. I'm just not a pathetic, spineless, soy milk drinking weakling with the sensitivity level of a second grader. Unlike some other people. Alright, this video already got long enough, so I'm gonna end it here and make a part 2. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet, and I'll see you all on the next video. Thank you for watching. Lok Thum.
Degenerates like you belong on a cross.